little talk is going to be entitled The Biological Universe, The Secrets of the Ancients. What I'm going to discuss is how we turned our back on this idea of a life force. So what I'm going to cover is some of the concepts held towards vitalism, prana, ki, mana, life force, or what is known as subtle energy or energy. So the first thing that, just to give a picture of how we used to look at it, and not so long ago, and there's an interesting statistic, and it's simply understood. If you asked, people, was there no sort of life force or creative force or something? I mean, the word would be something, I suppose, other than just chemicals. 97% of the world's population would suggest that there's something, whether it's a soul, vital energy, or whatever. But there's also another interesting statistic in the world of science, that nothingness, or the chemicals in the pond, it's still in the minority, because there's a high level of atheism in science. But the people who believe in it, as a recent statistic suggests, was that 43% believed in the nothingness of creation, just chemicals in the pond. And so 57% of scientists, so they would argue that we've looked at the evidence and it suggests it. Well, actually, the majority still believe that there's something, some life force. So I want to argue the case as to why we lost that life force and what that life force is. Obviously, I believe that this pranic, ki, vitalism, life force can be found in the center of the Old-Bar wave. So what I'm going to do is talk a little bit, just quoting what the famous Wikipedia has to say about it, and arguing the case. So vitalism is a doctrine that functions. All living organisms are due to a vital principle distinct from a biochemical reaction. 2. A doctrine that all the processes of life are not explicable by the laws of physics and chemistry alone, and that life in some part is self-determining. Where vitalism explicitly involves a vital principle, that is an element, is often referred to as a vital spark, energy, which sometimes equates to the soul. Vitalism has a long history in medical philosophies, most traditional healing practices. In Western tradition, found these vital forces were associated with four temperaments and humours. Eastern tradition posed similar forces such as ki, prana. It's often to contrast reductionism or the more mechanical approach. So basically, it's the principle of a life force, something else, something unseen, and that is a number of scientists follow the vitalism model rather than the religious or the other models of ancient religions. They produced a new version of it, but basically, if you then have a look at the Prana concept, so in Vedantic philosophy, Prana is a notion of a vital, life-sustaining life force, a vital energy, comparable to the Chinese notion of Qi. Prana is a central concept where it is believed to flow through a network of fine channels called the nadis. Its most subtle material form is the breath. Now this is an interesting one because I'll be bringing this reference later on in regards to a piece of equipment designed 40 years ago called the stomatoscope. So this pranic force is also to be found in blood. Now that is interesting. So this is the life force, but it is inside blood. Eventually, you know, we'll get back to what the ancients knew, but for now we've been derailed. And so that is prana and chi, which is the Chinese or Asian principle. And again, it's like just looking at the same thing. You know, there may be differences, like the prana holds itself, this life force in blood, but basically we're talking of one and the same thing. So you know, a unified view of what this source of energy is should be brought. So they should all be brought back together, really. So in traditional Chinese culture, Qi is an active principle forming part of any living thing. Frequently translated as life force, energy flow, central underlying principle in Chinese medicine and martial arts. The literal translation, Qi, is breath, air or gas. Concepts of Qi can be found in many cultures, Prana in the Vedantic, Mana in Hawaiian, Lung in Tibetan Buddhism, vital energy in Western philosophy. Some of the Qi can be understood as terms of energy, where it can be used by writers and practitioners of various esoteric forms of spirituality and alternative medicine. So you're building up a picture now. Healers, alternative medicine use this Qi or prana or vitalist force. So of course there's a reason why science doesn't want it, because it would give credibility to all these ancient practices. It would stand against the medical profession. The chemicals will solve illness within an electrochemical living organism. So this life force is the thing that I believe that is the placebo as well. So we move from, it's just to give a picture of how these things are. So mana is an indigenous Pacific island concept. So we've got them. We've got this all over the world. An impersonal force that resides in people, animals. This one includes all objects, inanimate objects as well. From Polynesia, it gives you all the different places that it comes from. Mana is a generalized concept, is understood as a precursor to formal religion. So again, this creative force is seen as a stepping stone to religion. It's commonly been interpreted as the stuff of which magic is formed, as well as substance of which souls are made of. So this mana, prana, chi, is more or less describing, to my mind, the same thing with small differences. There are differences between them all, but they're so close together that they may as well be one and the same thing. So what we'll look at now is another concept, which is a concept of subtle energy. Energy is often closely associated with the metaphor of the life as breath. The word ki, prana, spirit, for instance, all relate to the respective angles of the verbs breathe. Sometimes it is equated to the movement of breath in the body, sometimes described as visible auras, rays, feels, or audible tactile vibrations. These are often held to be perceptible to anyone, though this may require training or sensitization through various practices. So this subtle energy now is an unseen energy. So we could look at it. We'd have to look at it outside of. We can sense it. People can sense this subtle energy, and we can sense this. It's all wrapped into the prana, chi, life force, vitalism. But science has turned its back on it. Now, I want to talk about the reason at the point where it killed off vitalism, and it did it in a very efficient way. So what I'm going to be talking about is the destruction of the vitalism concept by what is no different than a type of religious dogma. So what I'm going to talk about, as I mentioned, is the stomatoscope. So I wanted to read you this by the designer of the stomatoscope, because this is a piece of equipment that was designed 40 years ago. The landscape of medical science is on the verge. So this is probably written 40 years ago, or it could be current, but the invention was 40 years ago. The landscape of medical science is on the verge of being radically altered forever by the use of a powerful microscope, the stomatoscope. Talks about the designer. This incredible device reaches magnification of 20 to 30 times diameter, well above the 2,500 diameter of conventional microscopes. Now, that is a massive breakthrough, 40 years ago. Massive. The sheer magnitude of the difference in performance gives the appearance of either a gross violation of the laws of physics or fraud. So, but there's videos on YouTube you can have a look at. But it violates the laws, so it can't be that it works, but you can see it working. It's a radical departure in the performance of optical and scanning electron microscope. It's truly a great discovery. Unfortunately, in most fields of science, a great deal of effort is put into listing why something will not work, even though it's working, instead of attempts to duplicate the results. This in turn creates a situation where what was science turns into religion. Because you have no mechanism to describe it, right, you reject it, so it can't work. Now, we've seen this with to get a patent on some of the new electrics, you have to prove the science, otherwise you can't do it, and yet the thing can still generate additional output of energy to the energy input, and because you can't prove the physics on it or the science on it, they won't offer you a patent on it. So this in turn creates a situation. What was science turns into religion, where orthodox dogma is to be taken on faith, and that which defies dogma is persecuted as heresy. So this thing now defies the science that we understand, and so it's heresy to speak that this microscope worked, and yet you can see it working. The establishment of a dogma slows down the rate of new discoveries that can be made. In the medical field, slow acceptance of new ideas can cause needless deaths. This is the case with the super microscope and the discoveries of Rice and Nazim's. So basically what they're saying is that this microscope will lead to new discoveries. Now, I was talking to my colleague who works the SEN. The SEN costs probably about 80 grand. It's an electron microscope. These stomatoscopes designed 40 years ago, reaching the diameters of that. There is a massive difference, and it's the way that the light works within it. What they do is they bring in two light sources, one of which is infrared. They pass them through a magnetic field, which then creates a stability within the blended frequencies. They shine it underneath the slide, and you can see now things in the infrared spectrum. Now the difference between this and the electron microscope is those slides at that magnification can be seen living. Normally they have to be prepared as dead slides or non-living. They also have to have staining. So this, I posted up a video, and I would suggest anyone have a look at it. So in blood, right, now this goes back to one of the prana and the things that this vital force, and in with it under the stomatoscope, which is infrared frequency, you can see things that shouldn't be in blood. A new process within that blood. They talk of it as a stomatid, something like that. I would talk about it in the terms of subtle energy, prana or chi, as it's said in one of the ancient ideas of this vital force that I've just been talking about. So the blood looks very different. It's alive, it's a higher magnification, and it's got like flashes of lights, of which in the blood this vital force has been found. So I've put up just a copy of that video so that people can have a look at it. And in the picture I'm posting with this talk, I've circled two of these flashes and cell-like structures with the little blue circles around them, and I've also posted up a picture of an orb with a hole in it. So this invention is not, if it's showing up, the biological process now have an additional force in them, like a life force. The last thing any scientist wants is for credibility to be given to any New Age healing movements or anything like that. So we have to look at how vitalism, things like the stomatoscope, things that were actually pointing us in the right direction, were destroyed. So what I want to talk about, just quickly, just to give an example, it's not for me to blow my own trumpet or anything, is just to give you an idea of plagiarism. I'll give you examples of how plagiarism of my work would create cherry-picking effect of the data. Now, in the all-bar wave theories and a number of ideas and predictions that I've made, and a lot of those have come true, there is palatable science, like science that could be and readily adopted into the science model of today. Well, what you would do is you would just be cherry picking the thing that's palatable. So say, for instance, the 10-20 years of researching the all-bar wave and collecting data and pictures and whatever could lead to the geological samples and the orb fugolite theory being taken and published. In fact, one of the lecturers I was work with for support him in his teaching modules suggested that I handed over all the geological sampling. Now, what would happen if I did that? And there is a reluctance to this, because you can manipulate it and say, well, lightning striking a sphere of energy, ball lightning, creates a fusion of silica to the surface and falls from the sky. So there'd be no reference of the all-bar wave process of being this life force, creative energy, the stuff that sometimes can be massless, that gains mass through charge. So what happens is then, if anybody then was trying to, in the early days, I think that I sent a number of the books out, and somebody had a book and then refused to send it back to me, and I was prepared to send them money to send it back, but they wanted to keep it because they wanted to see if there was anything that they could steal out of it or republish on their own work. So what happens is that the trouble is with this all-bar wave work is very few could grasp the total complexities of it to build the thing, because and a lot of it is visual data as well, so they'd have to repeat some of that visual data because it's pretty obvious that it would come from my data source. So what happens is that anybody publishing this kind of work will then corrupt the principle and the full understanding of how the journey is unfolded piece by piece over time. So what I want to talk about is Darwin's plagiarism, or the Darwin-Wallace effect. So, and there's a lot of evidence, so I'll post up a couple of little things on the internet, but it's pretty damn simple that he's been accused of plagiarism. So there's the Natural History Museum of Great Britain talk about missing letters written by Alfred Russel Wallace. So this is a little quote from their website, the Natural History Museum website. So, missing letters written by Alfred Russel Wallace. Now, this is one thing that many people will have never heard. Probably a lot of biologists will have heard it, but co-discoverer of the theory of evolution by natural selection with Charles Darwin. So we're going, hang on a moment, they've given equal credit. Now this is the Natural History Museum where the Darwin Centre is. So they've given equal credit to Wallace and Darwin, but they only have a Darwin Centre. They only talk Darwin. Now, why would anyone think that they only talk Darwin when Wallace is been described by their own museum, right, as the co-discoverer. So they've recently been donated these writings that Wallace had sent to Darwin, and that Darwin had ripped off, basically. So here's an article from another website, and it talks about Darwin plagiarizing his evolution theories. So I'll just read you a little extract from it, because they have these letters, they have them dated, they have them prior to Darwin's release of Natural Selection, and his rushed work. Wallace was working on that, I believe, about 10, maybe 20 years earlier. But of course, this is a theory that had also been bandied around in the science world. So it goes on to say some historians believe that all the major contributions with which Darwin is credited for in regards to the evolution theory, including natural selection, were actually plagiarized from other scientists. So now we have evidence of it. So now we have a scientist who's prepared to steal other people's work. Many, if not most, of Darwin's major ideas were found in earlier works, especially that of his grandfather. Charles Darwin rarely, if ever, gave due credit to any of the people from whom he liberally borrowed. This review looks at evidence for this position, concluding that much evidence exists to support this controversial view. So there's evidence for it. So we just go on to Darwin's plagiarism charges that just will not go away. And this is another website, and it talks about, as the scientific world prepares to mark Charles Darwin's bicentenary, the author of The Origin Species is facing accusations of plagiarism and unjustly claiming as the father of the evolution theory. One group of critics has commissioned computer experts with specialized anti-plagiarism software to scour Darwin's book, published in 1859, for similarities to a paper released a year before by Alfred Russel Wallace, a naturalist who worked for 8 years in what he termed the Malay archipelago, primarily in Indonesia and Malaysia. Initial indications are that the analysis will show some of the most important ideas on the origin of species were taken from Wallace. Now, he wrote to him and told him about this. So now we have Darwin, and I'm sorry to be labouring this, but I wanna get down to the nitty gritty, which is the death of vitalism, because Wallace believed in another force that was driving this creation, and he was a vitalist. He believed in the vital force. So I just want to cover the next topic, which is this vital force, prana, chi, or mana, and how it was destroyed as a concept, or how it was sidetracked or railroaded, or why did they choose Darwin. So the vitalists strongly rejected Darwin's theory of natural selection, as Darwin's theory of evolution denied the existence of any cosmic teleology. The vitalists saw Darwin's theories as too materialistic to explain the complexities of life. So, if we go on to Wallace, Alfred Russel Wallace believed in qualitative novelties could arise through the process of evolution, in particular the phenomenon of life mind. Like the vitalist, Wallace attributed these novelties to a supernatural agency. So he's not saying it's spontaneous creation now, chemicals in a pond formula. Later in life, Wallace was an advocate of spiritualism, believed believed in a non-material origin for the higher mental faculties of humans. He believed that evolution suggested that the universe had purpose and that certain aspects of living organisms were not explainable in terms of purely materialistic processes, as written in the 1909 magazine entitled The World of Life, which later expanded into a book of the same name. So we had a fork in the road. Darwin was connected. They didn't like the chi or life force. It was a route that they would have preferred a mechanistic universe. They chose the gravity model of creation, and so there was a splitting of the ways. Which one are we going to go down? Well, we don't want this old idea, this old indigenous idea of a life force. We don't particularly want that. So we're gonna close the door on that. We're gonna give you Darwin, and we're gonna get behind it, and we're gonna push it so hard that that everyone believes that it's rock, watertight and rock, and solid science. It's but basically this plagiarism leaves him not fully understanding the process. I mean, if you take parts of a theory, look, I was just saying, if somebody took parts of my theory and nicked it, it wouldn't give you the full understanding that the 20 years have given me. It didn't matter how much additional effort you put into it, you're always behind in timing. You lack the step-by-step process of the unfolding. You start with one thing and then you just sort of follow it. It's like back engineering a theory. Once you take bits of it from somebody else and back engineer it, you'll miss stuff out, stuff that he couldn't have known. So Wallace, was instrumental in this theory, and believed in the vitalist kind of concept. So this plagiarism, and there's lots and lots of articles of plagiarism in the science world. I mean, the science world just turns its back on it. It very rarely investigates this plagiarism, and it's throughout the science world. In fact, my brother's son is doing his doctorate, and we were talking about science, and he said, don't you think if there was anything in your theories and your scientific work that it would be stolen? Because we know that. Now, he was implying that all the people that he worked with were prepared to steal their co-workers' work. And he didn't realise what he was saying. He didn't realise that that what he was actually telling me is that the science world is full of people who are prepared to steal other people's work. How can you gain truth when you have a group of people that are prepared to be to act in that way? Searching for truth and plagiarism don't go together. You give people credit for what you are. You're searching for the truth, and in stating it, plagiarism requires lies. And so for Darwin not to have given anybody credit or cited the people that he's quoting in a proper way, or just saying this is I've taken on from another, from Wallace's theories or Wallace's letters that I've received. So basically, what we've got is the death of vitalism. So what I want to just talk about is other people who believed in this vitalism throughout history. One of the 19th century fathers of modern chemistry, though rejected the mystical explanations of vitalism, nevertheless argued that regulative force must exist within living matter to maintain its functions. And Karl Reichenbach later developed a theory of odic force, so again, this is another scientist developing another new name for it, a form of life energy that permeated all living things. No, so we've seen it in the telescope, we've seen it in the stomatoscope, it is existing in there. This concept never gained much support despite its prestige. Vitalism is now considered an obsolete term in the philosophy of science. So, but we have Ernst Mayr, co-founder of the modern evolutionary synthesis and a critic of both vitalism and reduction. Now this is a modern day science, writing in 2002, after the mathematical development of the underlying theories stated. It would be so this is a lead in evolutionary synthesis, probably into DNA and stuff like that. I don't know much about his work. I'm just quoting these things just to give people an idea of, it's still held, a vital force, a life force. 97% of people believe in it. It would be historical to ridicule vitalists when one reads the writings of leading vitalists like Dreisach. One is forced to agree with him that many basic problems of biology simply cannot be solved by a philosophy as that of Descartes, in which the organism is simply considered a machine. So what's he telling us? He's telling us that there is a life force. He's saying that I believe in a life force. I believe, I don't like vitalism because it sort of links me to the New Age movement. It links me to the idea of placebo and a missing substance. Well, they've already found it. They found it in the stomatoscope. It photographed in infrared. Why are they recently, most of the new scientific equipment going into space and observing space are in the infrared spectrum. Why? Because they found this particle in space as well. It is in the infrared frequency, and obviously it's in the magnetic frequencies of light as well. So this stuff is known. So I just want to go back to another one. In fact, it talks about Louis Pasteur. In fact, some of the greatest scientific minds of all time continue to investigate the possibilities of vital properties. Louis Pasteur, shortly after his famous rebuttal of spontaneous generation, so a lot of these people who have given us the greatest pieces of science do not believe in two chemicals forming life. Performs several experiments. Now they'd be interesting to repeat these experiments that he felt supported the vital concepts of life. So he has in his life he believed that he'd found the evidence to work it. Now, obviously once they were favouring Darwin, that would have closed the door on it. So all this ancient mythology, all this these ancient concepts of healing, a life force, chi, prana, have their roots in certainly in religions, but uh, in the ancient understanding of the world, so that they knew that there was this creative force. So what I want to talk about now is the deliberate destruction of this mythology. What I would call is the Illuminati movement, or the New Age movement. Um, it's been done it's been done in many guises. And so what had happened over the years, and I'm not going to really talk about the individual cases, because I want to talk about how they're trying to control us, our mindsets down a path where we have really very little option just to look at to it's the tail wagging the dog, basically. As soon as you start to fragment and break up all these indigenous and ancient understandings, you can control the agenda. You cloud the waters. I mean, it was recently, I think it was 2,000 Mayan codices were found in the Hearst Museum, and yet they were all supposed to be burned. And so our history is clouded. So basically, what happens is we go over to the Maya and we nick all their stuff, we take it away. The calendar's realigned. The calendar's realigned to apparently to the Mayan calendar. And all these codices were burned, and yet they spent years, Pope Gregory realigning that calendar, and they were working off some documents. And then all of a sudden, last year I think it was, the Randall Hearst Museum have 2,000 of these codices, and they basically, the whole world's been working off 3 or 4 of them. So how does this happen? Well, we firstly need to have a model where we can treat indigenous people as savages, and the Darwinian model and the eugenics movement suited that very well. And justified the slave trade and many other atrocities. So basically, what happened is that we then, we were doing it anyway, but they were looking for justifications of it, sort of after the event. So basically, there's I just posted up a couple of things, like the massacre of the indigenous Australians, the Aborigines. The Atlantic slave trade, again from this Darwinian life force thing that we drive along, we can then become inhumane. There's no creative thing, there's no soul, there's no accountability, there's no humanity. We can just get a mechanistic way of being, and therefore we can treat people inhumanely. The new eugenics movement was, I think it was started by Darwin's grandson. And so this superiority that comes out of this killing off of the vital force, and not making us all connected, and the oneness, and these ancient understandings now are all shattered. So we go into Africa, we go into the Aboriginals, we nick all their assets, and we nick all their stories, we nick all their artifacts, and we leave us with a very poor understanding of what these ancient people were saying. You only have to look at the American Indian to see how the waters have been muddied. I remember I went to America, and I said to them, where's the secret grounds, where's your mounds? I knew nothing of America, and I knew that there are mounds everywhere. And yet one of the Illuminati boyos, or one of the founding fathers of America, was sent on that mission to find all the mounds within the USA. And yet, and the people on the I forget the park of it. It's on the Virginia Blue Ridge Mountain. There's a state park there. It's about 200 miles long on the ridge of the top. And I spoke to one of the park wardens, and she said, "Oh well, we don't know of any of these things because we murdered them before we had a chance to ask them about this land." The Americans just came in and killed them out and exterminated them, and very little was left. Move them off their lands and stuff like that. But then, what you do is you're killing off our ancient, the ancient understanding, and it's quite an easy way then to control, because then you can bring in the new agenda. I mean, we haven't learned anything. We still got the same process today. I mean, the Iraq War, the Sumerian artifacts, particularly the Anuna Elish, and how the creation truly went on. The museums in Iraq, I mean, we come to liberate them, and we've learnt nothing, because this is deliberate. All the artifacts are stolen. They've turned up in personal collectors, or they turned on the antiquities markets, these artifacts. I mean, that explains Randolph Hearst having so many of the Mayan codices. So basically, they nick them and then they sell them, and that's what we've done. And this kills off the true, because Sumeria was the oldest writing known to mankind in cuneiform. Now all those artifacts have gone AWOL or missing. But of course, it suits these the winners of these wars, because then they can start to rewrite the history in whatever it was. Like Pope Gregory rewrote the history in terms of the Catholic Christianity. The winners of the Iraq War now will knock all this stuff off and start to rebuild another type of history. And so this is the destruction of ancient mythology, and certainly creating a confusion with it. So what we have to do is try and make sense of what was this life force? Why have we been? Why was it deliberately destroyed? Why was Darwin chosen over Wallace? And because he was socially connected, and he was saying the things that justified the slave trade, and many others. So we have to give ourselves an understanding of what this pranic chi force could be. And I believe I found it in the study of the old bar wave. And so this vitalism, or life force, is present in the blood. I've showed a little bit of similarities between the old bar wave and that microscope work. And so what I'm going to do now is just show you a section from microscope. I've slowed down one section, and I'll try and draw attention to it. It's very difficult, but I just want to show it. And so what we have is a live cell throwing out these webs, what I call webs, because it's the old bar wave and web process. What you see is it's slowed down at this moment. It's firing out the strand just prior to dividing. Now what I've done is I've cropped that image and put it into a collage. And what the collage is captured image of that video footage in the top corner. And what we have is, in the central area of it, we have distinct similarities with a cell pushing out a strand, the pitted effect of the nucleus within the cell itself. However, that is not a microscope image. That is a cast of Northumberland rock art from 4,500 years. In amongst that collage are photographs of the Orb-Bar wave. And so what we're looking at is a distinct similarity between the rock art, which obviously I'm not suggesting they had microscopes, I'm suggesting that this process was seen. So it's a pretty way out theory, but I believe that that is a pretty strong and striking similarity. Now you can say, oh well, the human mind's designed to develop patterns. You know, but that's what science is about, is observing patterns. You know, and as long as you're disciplined enough and you're looking at the correct patterns. So I want to talk about, I'm going to talk about pattern recognition just a little bit. So what we have is Scandinavian rock art. It's been painted, it's been painstakingly painted and photographed. Now what we have is what I class the hook web orb. So basically what I've done in the image that I'm showing is you have a line that I put together the geometric shape of the hook web orb. Now the hook web orb is not like a crescent moon. It has two distinct meeting points, and obviously it meets on the edge of the circumference of the circle. But if you measure those angles, they will vary by 1 degree. I mean, I know it's pretty rough, but what we have is we have 3 stages. We have a drop into the thing, which creates the hook, a rise, and that angle on both the pictures of from my data of the hook web orb and on the rock art match within 1 degree. Now that isn't pattern recognition. That is something being the same as something else. You know, we're not talking about faulty pattern recognition here. We're talking about something similar. And so what I would like to do then is introduce some of the processes of the Orb-Bar wave and the web orbs, where they throw out their webs, and the cells that where we want to call them a biological living force or a creative force. So what we have is a mouse fibroblast cell, and we have a picture of the web orbs, and they break down, they throw energy out through the webs. We also have in the next picture we have a collage of orbs that are attached to trees. Some of these were taken in sequence, and how they deliver energy to trees and break down on trees. So this vital force now they're delivering into trees. Some of these images were taken during lightning storms. So lightning is the charge is actually assisting this process. Some of those photographs were sequential, and some of them were taken before the sap rises. So now there's an ancient tradition of energy, the gods that come down and provide life force, and so we have these gods being the Orb-Bar wave, and they're providing the life force. So all this stuff is the vital source. Vitalism, Prana, Chi, whatever you want to call it. I mean, it would be easier if we had one name for it. So that picture is the vital energy being delivered to shrubs and plants. And so what I would like to show you is an image from the book. And one of them is a fertilized egg. I put it at the end of the book that I published in 2006 or 7, or whatever it is. You know, the theories have moved on since then, and the ideas have moved on since then. And so what you want to do, they say, oh, well, it's round and it's similar, you know. I mean, yeah, but we've seen nucleuses in these things, and you know, it's in my making, in my mind, that this is the primordial force of creation. So what I put together is another collage. What we have is the hook where, you know, if I run from the bottom up, in the bottom corner, that's the simplest colony of life in the sea. And that colony photographed actually has the hook web orb, or not as similar as the rock art, but it has the hook web orb. So that's a colony of life. Then the wave, which is pictured at the bottom. These are 3.2 billion year old fossils that has the same geometric shape and form. We obviously have the nucleus and the orb with the hole in it. Again, some of these spiny spheroids in the oceans form chalk and various different things, but the simplest and oldest fossil evidence, this is from the Paleontology Society, and so we have our spiked orbs. So basically what we have is a life force that, as it gains mass, becomes living material. So it's not chemicals in a pond is a partial answer to it. I think even me saying this is too simplistic, because there are things in our ancient histories which defy any understanding. And as I started to look at all these ancient mythologies and everything, I think they're more true than not true. I think we just lack understanding to them. And so what you have is your spiked orb, and you have the type of chromosome looking thing within this orb bar wave, and this is the primordial force. You know, as this force gains mass of chemical, it starts to bring life around. But I'm not sure that's a good enough example of it. You know, I think that anyone to lay claim to understanding that fully would be would somewhat it somewhat challenges the mind. I would just say that yes, the orb bar wave has opened up massive doorways to me, and I'm not sure. You know, you come to another set of questions, and they're far bigger than the ones that you started with. So anyway, so what I want to talk about now is we have under the microscope, and this is an interesting thing. We have the orb with the hole in it, although it's a cell. So we have this the nadis, or the presence in blood, and what I've done is put together again a collage based on that microscope video, and what you can see is the shape of those cells doing exactly the same thing. So again, you know, we have this life force, and it's present, and it's been present in our rock art, so it was once seen. It's present underneath a microscope, and it's present in my study data. So I believe that this is the biological vital force. How it functions would be too difficult for me to start explaining the division and why the division occurs. and what is encoded within it. I think at the moment you can just look at and so we come on to I made a prediction that if this was a universal force, you'd see it in space. You can see it under the microscope. You can see it on the surface of the Earth. I can video the same processes. I understand how the orb-bar wave breaks down. I believe it is the vital force, and I believe it is the creative force. So there were many predictions, such as spheroids being found on the surface of Mars. This is prior to some of these rover and spirit findings. Bars that will be embedded and look like monoliths or look like man-made structures that have fallen from the sky. But I'm not going to talk about the old fugolite theory and how that it all fits together, how planets are formed. That's for another time. So what I did is I looked in space, and it didn't take long, and what we had is a video of the tether incident. I think many people have seen it now, where they were
81 nautical
trying to
miles
generate
now from
electricity,
Columbia.
and it snapped. And so what there was, it looked like looking under a microscope at space. And so this is the pranic force, or the vital force.
Franklin, we see a long line,
I think
a couple of star-like things, and a lot of things swimming in the foreground. Can you describe what you're seeing?
So what I've done is I've put a picture of Pontypridd Common, of a typical orb with the cutout, the Pac-Man effect or whatever, and I've compared it with a NASA video. That orb is supposed to be 3 to 4 miles wide, and I've continued then just to show the pulsing and the swimming of this stuff. Now, although it would be valuable for anybody to go back to that video on the stomatoscope and have a look at that as well. And you can do your own sort of observation as to, do you think that they're the same? Obviously your mind's going to be telling you, what is this living process in our skies? And how is this process? How are we surrounded by it? Well, it's just the vital force that everybody knows about. It's just that through new technologies and through infrared studies of our universe, we can see it. That's simply. So what I've added is just the similarities of the study of the orb. What we have is the process of fertilizing an egg. And we created during our research time orbs within orbs. We didn't talk about we didn't know where we were going with this. So all we said is, well, there is an orb forms inside another orb, and this looks very similar to the fertilization of an egg. Although I'm not suggesting it's the same process, and saying that visually it looks the same. And so we have the webs that the orbs throw out, which is very much like the fibroblast process. We have, and I haven't shown it on this vision, the division of the bars. And perhaps I'll see if I can get that division of the bars cropped into this video to show how division really works outside of the Earth is a closed system. It is a living system. And so it's what it would appear is in air, but that division of the bar, that bar forms the sphere. It twists in pairs. It does all the things that we would expect from it. So I'll run that into this clip just to give people an understanding of how the bars divide. The interesting thing about those bars dividing, a biologist was, I was working balancing energy for her partner who'd had a back problem, and I said, oh, do you want to have a look at this research? And as a biochemist, she had a look at it, and she just sat there and scratched her head. She said to me, do you know what you've got there? And I said, no, this is back in 2003 or 4. I said, well, no, I don't. You know, what do you mean? And she said, you have viruses dividing. I said, what? She said, that is exactly what I've seen down the microscope, you know, in my study times. You have viruses dividing. And and this was one of the things that led me to looking at the life force issue. I mean, she could see it because she was a biologist with a reasonably open mind. And so we have the all-bar wave, the vital force, and it is a creative force. So at the final of this talk, what I'm just going to do is show that piece of rock art of what our ancient ancestors were seeing. It has the distinct hook web orb. It's 4,500 years, but it could be older. I mean, it's only dated by the evidential archaeology that's left around. Because there's very little archaeology left around, then you just got to, you know, decide what they think it is. I mean, most archaeology surrounding these ancient sites is negligent. You know, you're not going to find it. You know, you're going to find very, very little of these people. You know, how the heck that occurs, I'm not so sure. They must have been cleaning the sites every day. Anyway, that is a piece of rock art, and it's depicting the vital force. It's depicting the creative force. And thank you very much. Hope you enjoyed the video. Goodbye.